Well, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Strategizing for Sustainability. I'm Greg Berry, Director of Communications in the Office of Alumni Affairs. Since this is a virtual event, please excuse technical issues or glitches that may pop up. If you have any problems with video or audio, click the reconnect button on your screen to get back to the webinar right away. Today's webinar is being recorded. A replay will be uploaded onto our website by tomorrow. Also, if you have any questions for today's guests, drop them in the chat. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. At this time, I would like to introduce our guest, Nick Ciancio. Nick is the Sustainability Coordinator with UAB's Office of Sustainability. He has earned 3 degrees from UAB. In 2019, he graduated with his Bachelor of Science degree in Neuroscience. And in 2023, he is awarded both a Master of Public Health and a Master of Public Administration. Nick, thanks so much for joining us and carving out time to have a discussion about this very important topic.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be able to join everybody today. I'm super excited. Thank you all for taking the time to learn about sustainability. So how about we just dive right in? So before we talk about how UAB is being sustainable and how you as an individual can be sustainable, I think it's really important that we all share a common definition on what sustainability is. And so the definition that UAB uses among a lot of other institutions is the definition from the United Nations. And that definition is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So when we think about needs, needs are electricity, water, food, and shelter, all of the things that are required to live. And so we want to make sure that we have all of those reliably, right? You can see I have the lights on where I am. Hopefully there's some air conditioning wherever you're watching. There's clearly electricity since you're able to use the internet. You're probably sheltered in a building, and maybe you're even enjoying lunch right now. And so you're getting to meet the needs that individuals have. But we want to make sure that we can continue to meet our needs, but make sure that all of the people that aren't living on Earth just with us yet get to have those needs too. And so that's why population and consumption are 2 critical components about sustainability. And so why is this such an important thing? So like I said, population and consumption. Right now, our current population sits around 8 billion. That sounds like a lot. But when you think about how many more people have joined us in not a long amount of time, it's even a more amazing number. Since 2010, 1 billion more people have joined us living here on Earth. And since 1998, it's increased by 2 billion. So easily within my lifetime, it's increased 2 billion. And since 1950, it's increased between 3 and 4 billion. So within a lot of people's lifetimes, we've watched the population increase. And we can expect by 2050, the population will be between 9.8 to 14 billion people. That's a really, really large range. And it's mostly because a lot of people, they're having to project what population trends there are. A lot of countries are not having as many children as they were before, but still 9.8 is a lot of people. And it's important to remember that people are using those resources that I talked about in the previous slide, but we're not only using our resources like we need, but we're also using them 50% faster than they would be replenishing. So for those of you that are gainfully employed, I want you to ask yourself, what happens if you use your money 50% faster than it comes in? Usually when I ask that question during a presentation where people are in a crowd, somebody yells, "You go broke." And that's exactly what happens. And we don't want that to happen for the planet. And then we're also expecting a 50% increase in energy consumption by 2050. And that's because so many other countries are starting to want certain resources like air conditioning. Here in Alabama, it gets really, really hot. I know that when it was 110 degrees outside, I really appreciated going into the office and into my apartment and getting that cold blast of air conditioning. People want that other places too, and that's only fair. And so because we're going to anticipate those countries coming online with their air conditioning, we can expect a 50% increase in energy consumption by 2050. And so since we're using our renewable resources 50% faster than they replenish, and we expect energy consumption to increase 50%, it's really important that we have sustainability in mind as we move forward to make sure that everyone living today has access to all of the needs that we need, but also to make sure everybody can live comfortably in the future as well. And so there are three spheres of sustainability. We're primarily going to talk about the environmental component today. That's mostly what people tend to think about when they think about sustainability. But there's also a social component of sustainability and an economic component of sustainability. And only when you have the environmental, social, and economic components of sustainability do you have true sustainability. And so a social example of sustainability would be getting an education. So for those alums here at UAB, you've gotten a world-class education from UAB. That is an example of how UAB is socially sustainable. And then economic sustainability is promoting the economy or doing research and development, a critical task that UAB also does. So I like to think that UAB is quite a sustainable institution because we're checking the boxes in each of these spheres. So speaking of UAB, why is it important that we're a sustainable institution? And can I just claim that we're sustainable and we call it a day? Well, let's first talk about why it's important that UAB is sustainable. We are Alabama's largest employer. 1 out of every 20 Alabamians is either directly or indirectly employed by UAB. When I first started working in the Office of Sustainability 8 years ago, that figure was 1 out of every 31. So we can already see UAB's impact has grown so much in just the past 8 years. We're also home to the 3rd largest public hospital in the nation, and we're the 8th largest overall hospital. And I'm sure that'll be changing as UAB continues to grow. We cover more than 100 city blocks and have 16 million square feet of space, so we're very, very big. We have over 100 countries represented by our faculty, staff, and students, so we're exceptionally diverse. And then we used over 360 million kilowatt hours in the fiscal year of 2021 to 2022. And if you're not sure what a kilowatt hour is, that's just the unit of electricity for how much electricity is being used. And 360 million is a really large number. Sometimes when you get into those really big numbers, it's hard to understand just how much electricity that is. So for context, that's about as much electricity that would power approximately 36,000 homes. So that's how much electricity UAB used, and just electricity, not including the natural gas we use or the steam we generate or the chilled water we use. So we have a huge impact. And we also have a large economic impact, $12 billion. So when UAB makes changes or when UAB decides to do something, we create ripples all throughout Jefferson County, Birmingham, Alabama, and the nation. And that's why it's really important that UAB be sustainable. So when I talk about sustainability in higher education, or when you just hear about sustainability at UAB and other institutions, it's tracked using a certain rating system. So the Sustainability Tracking Assessment and Rating System, or STARS, is a self-reporting rating system that essentially grades UAB and other higher education institutions on how sustainable we are. We undergo this rating system once every few years to help us figure out if we're on track to meet some of the goals that we've set and to also compare how far we've gone since our baseline year. So that's really important to keep in mind. We aren't the ones, Nick Ciancio or leadership in sustainability don't say UAB is the most sustainable. We're a very sustainable organization, but we're assessed on how sustainable we are. So that way, everyone, whether they're at Alabama or not, or a student at UAB or not, or an alum or not, they can know quantitatively that UAB is sustainable. And so what does the STARS assessment cover? I like to say that it covers everything in the kitchen sink. We get assessed on academics. So are we teaching our students about sustainability? Are we doing research on sustainability? We get assessed on engagement. Are we engaging the campus on sustainability efforts? Are we engaging the public on sustainability efforts? We also get assessed on our operations. So for example, are our buildings being built sustainably? How are we sourcing our electricity? How are people getting to campus? How are we handling our water? Those are all things and more on how we get assessed on how sustainable we are as an institution. And then planning and administration. Are we coordinating and planning with sustainability in mind, thinking about what we're going to do with the buildings after they've lived their life at UAB? Are we emphasizing diversity and affordability in our plans as an institution? How is our emphasis on health, well-being, and work? And then the innovation section is the extra credit section that I always like to talk about. This is where we really get to show just how UAB shines in so many different aspects that are sustainability related. So now that we know how UAB is assessed on our sustainability efforts, let's talk about how we've done. So the STARS rating system has several different levels. The best grade or level that you can get is platinum. From platinum, it goes gold, silver, bronze, and then reporting. And so the first time we did this, we scored a silver rating. We were very proud of this rating because it was the first time we had undergone the STARS assessment, and it showed that we were having a very good benchmark. We shared our assessment with the community and with President Watts, and President Watts is always pushing us harder and harder to be better and better. And so he said, silver's great, but how about we go for gold for two reasons. One, because he knows we can accomplish it, and two, because green and gold are our colors. So what we did was we said, okay, we're at silver, how do we get to gold? And we analyzed our survey responses that we had given to STARS, and we looked over our answers and we asked 3 questions. We said, what is possible, what is reasonable, and what is impactful? And from there, we started to figure out what we could do to get from silver to gold and to make UAB a more sustainable institution. And so we developed what we like to call an inclusive plan for UAB. The reason why we call it, we say it's so inclusive, is because we didn't just analyze our STARS report and look at how we could be sustainable. We actually surveyed UAB faculty, staff, students, and got their input. We had thousands of survey responses from those individuals across the hospital, to our teaching spaces, to our research buildings. In fact, 10% of the entire UAB community at the time took the survey and had direct input in our strategic plan. So it was exceptionally inclusive. We also did road shows at UAB Hospital, so people could even sticker what they wanted to see us accomplish. And so we went all the way from the individual freshmen who wanted to see us be as sustainable as possible, all the way up to Dr. Watts and his cabinet, because we wanted to make sure everybody, whoever wanted to have their input on this plan, had input. And so what were some of the objectives of our strategic plan? Like I said earlier, they built on the work that we had previously accomplished from our STARS rating. We were making sure that there were areas of improvement that were identified by UAB leadership, but also by the faculty, staff, and students. And then we set deadlines of 2025 to achieve these goals. The reason why we set a deadline was because we really wanted to make sure that we could hold ourselves accountable and that faculty, staff, and students could hold us accountable as well. I like to use the analogy of the New Year's resolution. If you've ever had a New Year's resolution before, you know that it starts on January 1st and it goes all the way to December 31st. And the reason why is because you want to make sure you achieve whatever your New Year's resolution goal is. If I want to learn the piano, I should probably start doing research on piano lessons in January and make sure that I can play it at least a little bit by December 31st. If I don't have that December 31st deadline, who knows if I'll end up playing the piano. And so now we're going to talk about a handful of the things in the strategic plan that we are working on, again, to achieve by 2025. So the goals that we have in energy is to get 20% of all of the UAB's electricity from renewable energy by 2025. So that would be about enough electricity to power 7,000 houses. And then we also want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by 2025. And so let's talk about why we're wanting to do this. So UAB gets a lot of its electricity from the Miller Steam Plant in Jefferson County. It was the largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the country this past year, in 2021. The data hasn't been released for 2022 yet, using 21 million tons of carbon dioxide. So that's a lot of carbon dioxide that's associated with how we're generating our electricity. And we want to try to make it cleaner. And we'll talk about how we're doing that. And then we were nearly last in the nation in solar in 2021. And so UAB wants to be a leader in this area to help bump Alabama further up on that list. So that way we can show that it gets really sunny here in Alabama, and we can harvest some of that sun to turn it into lighting in our buildings and air conditioning in our residence halls. And so the 2025 goal specifically targets Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon emissions. So a really good way to remember Scope 1 versus Scope 2 emissions is by thinking one is burn and one is buy. So Scope 1 emissions is anything that's burned at UAB. So think about the vehicles that UAB faculty might use or UAB staff might use to go and do their job. Not their personal vehicle, but a state vehicle. And then buy is all the electricity that UAB buys. And so that's what we're trying to do on our campus. And what we really want to do is we want to get this electricity from solar energy, just because it shines, the sun shines so much here in Alabama. A lot of people have asked why we don't do wind energy. It's not windy enough. I know that we have gusty days here, but it's not windy enough to reliably get 20% of our electricity. But the sun does shine enough for us to source our electricity from that avenue. So we're working with our utility to come up with a plan. This would be about half of a solar farm. So several acres would be necessary for us. And we're working with the utility to get this done. We've been working on it for quite some time, but we're confident that we can get this across the finish line. So now let's talk about transportation. Transportation is actually the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions in the US. And UAB wants to try to do our part to make it easier for faculty, staff, and students to reduce that. So one thing that we can do is we can work with the city to make sure there are bus lanes and bike lanes and sidewalks on all streets. If you're an alum that's still in the Birmingham area, you might know 10th Avenue had a road diet where they made the road a little skinnier to add some bike lanes. And that there is now a comprehensive bus lane all throughout 5th Avenue as well, that bikes can bike in as well. We also provide incentives for individuals. So we partner with organizations like Commute Smart that will pay individuals to walk, bike, or carpool to UAB. It's a great way to reduce emissions and also help you save money on gas and to get compensated by an organization. And then UAB also provides electric vehicle charging to employees for free as of right now. There's a map that shows just how many there are. We have 24 electric charging stations all across campus already that some of the public can access as well. So we're really trying to make it easier for people to get around campus in Birmingham in a green manner. So now we're going to talk about our buildings. So you might have remembered me say that UAB has 16 million square feet of buildings and over 100 city blocks. UAB does stand for the University of Alabama at Birmingham, but I also like to say that it stands for the university that's always building, because there's always construction going on, because we're growing ever more. It's fantastic to see the growth that UAB is doing. But it's also important to remember that construction can have an environmental impact if you're not diligent about how you're constructing. So we're going to talk about how we're trying to make our buildings more sustainable. So there is a certification called LEED. It stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So this is a standard that UAB now builds to. All academic buildings are built to at least the LEED standard, with a goal of meeting LEED Silver. Right now, we've got several buildings that are either being built right now that are going to be LEED standard, or being designed that will be LEED standard. So that's very, very exciting. And what LEED stands for is making sure that we have metering all throughout the building and holding individuals accountable to help them figure out how they can help save on electricity. We also make sure that there is access to transportation in these LEED buildings, making sure there are bike racks or that there's a UAB bus stop nearby. We make sure there's green infrastructure, so that way there is shade that people can sit in and enjoy their lunch break on, or to try to reduce flooding when we have heavy rain events. And we also have waste reduction. We try to make sure that as much waste doesn't go to landfill as possible by providing all different types of recycling streams in these buildings. And then we also make sure to promote wellness. A lot of people need to remember that if you're working in an office space, you're spending a lot of time there. And it's important to feel comfortable and to feel happy there and to feel healthy there. And so our LEED buildings, as you can see in this photo, they have a lot of windows to help provide natural lighting to promote wellness, and the greenery also promotes wellness. So this is just a really comprehensive way that we make sure that the occupants of our buildings, whether they're faculty, staff, students, or just people visiting, are comfortable and happy in our buildings and are doing it sustainably. Now, one of the really cool things about being LEED certified in our buildings is we have to make sure that we're handling construction and demolition waste in a sustainable manner. So for example, we have to divert at least 75% of waste by weight of total construction and demolition waste to be LEED certified. So whenever you see construction and demolition waste or a construction and demolition site at UAB's campus, you can think about how 75% of that waste is either being recycled, reused, or upcycled. Only 25% of it or lower by weight is being sent to landfill. And so UAB is making sure that the growth that we have is as sustainable as possible. So now we're going to talk about one of our quintessential programs. It's the Solar House and Sustainable Community. We built the Solar House in 2017 for the United States Department of Energy's Solar Decathlon competition, where students were tasked with designing the house and many staff helped build the house. It was built here on campus and then shipped to Denver, Colorado, where we gave over 90,000 tours to individuals. We had to show that the house could be lived in, that it was comfortable. We had to host house parties and dinner parties and charge an electric vehicle, and it had to be completely tied off of the electrical power grid to show that living sustainably is possible. And so after we competed in the Solar Decathlon competition, we took the house apart and shipped it back to Birmingham, where it sits as a permanent fixture on our campus at the intersection of 17th Street and 11th Avenue South. It's open every day, Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 p.m. We have 2 people working at the Solar House that give tours to the public. So if you're in the neighborhood, you could always stop on by and say, hey, I'd like a tour today. Or you can always book an appointment if you'd like on our website. But one really exciting time to come and visit the Solar House is the ACES National Solar Tour. So the ACES National Solar Day is a day dedicated to emphasizing renewable energy and solar homes, and UAB participates in that. So I'd encourage all of you to mark your calendars for Saturday, October 7th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. to come and check out our Solar House and Sustainable Neighborhood and learn about our battery storage and how the Solar House is still off grid and how we generate enough electricity for 3 to 4 days worth of power in case it's a really, really dreary, rainy day. And we can also show you about gardening. So highly encourage you to come and check us out. It'll be a blast. Some of the other great venues at the Solar House and Sustainable Neighborhood is our monarch way station. So monarch butterflies are an endangered species. And so what we have done is we've actually planted milkweed at the site of both the Solar House and Honors Hall so people can learn about monarch butterflies, but also so monarch butterflies can stop at the milkweed, lay their eggs, and they turn into caterpillars, as you can see here on this image. And then the caterpillars munch on the milkweed. They get really fat and happy, and they form chrysalis, as you can see all the way on your screen on the left. And from there, they turn into monarch butterflies, and they're released into the wild, and they go on their migratory patterns. So this is just a really great way that UAB sustainability works to educate people, but also to promote biodiversity and help an endangered species out. We also have UABs on our campus. It is across from the Solar House. These bees live at the garden. They pollinate within 3 miles. That's generally about as far as a bee will go from its hive. And most of the plants in that area are not sprayed with pesticides, so these bees are particularly happy. And then their honey is harvested and sent to UAB donors. So we're just really trying to show that an urban campus can emphasize biodiversity and sustainability while still maintaining everything that's great about being in the city. So now let's talk about research. So for those of you that don't know, UAB is a large research institution. We generate over $800 million in research with a goal of $1 billion here in the next few years. And it's important to do research sustainably. Research spaces can use up to 5 to 10 times more electricity than traditional office spaces, and up to 4 times more water per square foot than office spaces. So it's really important that we try to get researchers thinking with sustainability in mind without compromising research integrity, safety, or the great research that they're doing at UAB. And we do this primarily through our Green Labs program. And so if you're thinking, well, what's a green lab? A green lab is any lab that is conducting research that wants to implement sustainable lab practices through behavioral changes. And so the Green Labs program was UAB's first comprehensive initiative to reduce waste and energy in laboratories. There are several other institutions that have Green Labs programs, and the list is growing more and more every day. These are some of the more notable counterparts that we have. So Harvard, University of Washington, UC Berkeley, and Emory all have Green Labs programs. But UAB was the first major institution in the state of Alabama to implement a Green Labs program, and we've provided guidance to other institutions in Alabama to try to help them replicate the success that we've had. And we're actually one of the largest Green Labs programs at a university internationally. And we're really excited about that and just how much our researchers have enjoyed implementing sustainable lab techniques, and we're really looking forward to having more people participate in the program. And so now let's talk about well-being and work. We've talked a lot about environmental sustainability, and so we're going to touch on social sustainability very briefly here. And so this is part of our sustainability strategic plan, and it's to support the links between healthy and sustainable lifestyles and their impacts on work life. And so one of the major ways that UAB has done this outside of the Sustainability Office is committing to a grand challenge of dramatically improving the health of all Alabamians by elevating our state out of the bottom 10 in national health rankings by 2030. It's an amazing challenge, and UAB has invested a tremendous amount of money and resources into this to make certain neighborhoods more walkable and to really allow people to know how they can live more in a healthy way. And another way that UAB has promoted wellness and work is by being the first university in the United States to adopt the Okanagan Charter. If you're unfamiliar with the Okanagan Charter, it makes UAB a health promoting university, which means that instead of thinking about promotion of health in a bubble, right? We're just thinking, oh, we're going to promote health here and promote health here. Instead of thinking like that, being a health promoting university means that UAB is thinking about individuals' health and public health at large in every way that UAB operates. And so an example of this would be transitioning our gasoline lawn equipment at the hospital to electric lawn equipment. It helps us reduce emissions, which is great, but it also helps us promote the health and well-being of the workers who do such a great job landscaping the space, because they're no longer having to hear loud noises right by their ear and they're no longer having to breathe in fumes. But it also promotes the health and well-being of our patients. They don't have to hear loud noises when they're recovering in our hospital because the electric ones are so much quieter. And so we're really looking at how we can promote public health and individuals' health in every decision that we make. And so why is it important that UAB achieves these goals? So we're a known leader throughout the state, throughout the region, and throughout the country. And achieving these goals in our strategic plan sets a standard for other institutions in Alabama. We're also the largest single-site employer in Alabama and the largest consumer of electricity of our utility. Any changes the university makes will have a cascading effect. And then these achievements would further set UAB as a leader of sustainability throughout the Southeast and the nation. And so if UAB, which has a tremendous economic impact and employs 1 out of every 20 Alabamians, either indirectly or directly, is able to achieve these goals outlined in our strategic plan, it illustrates to other large entities that they can follow the path that we have laid, and they can implement sustainable practices as well and help make Alabama overall more sustainable. And so now that we've talked about how UAB is being sustainable, and now that we've defined sustainability, how about we talk about things that you can do as an individual to live sustainably? So let's start with eating. It's something that we all do, hopefully multiple times a day, and that can have an impact, but it's on the environment, but it's something that we have to do. So one thing that you can do is try to reduce your plastic use when eating. Try not to take clamshell containers as much as possible, or you can always forego straws. Try to eat locally or seasonally. Have a flexitarian diet. I don't usually encourage people to have vegetarian or vegan diets for a variety of reasons. If you do have such a diet, that's good and that's okay. But having a flexitarian diet means, choosing to eat more veggies than meat on occasion or during certain meals. You don't have to go all the way to vegan or all the way to vegetarian to eat sustainably. Also making sure that you're eating organic and cage-free eggs. If you're using cooking oil, you can actually convert it to biodiesel. You can recycle cooking oil at the UAB Recycling Center. So I would highly encourage you to keep your oils. You're actually not supposed to dump them down the drain, so you can keep them and cook with them again. I know a lot of people do that because it really helps bring out the flavor. But ultimately, when you're finished with your oil, you can send it over to the UAB Recycling Center and it'll be converted into biodiesel. It's also important to do fair trade coffee and eat sustainable seafood to help reduce the environmental impact and the social impact of the coffee and seafood industries. And then also just reducing food waste in general. 40% of food waste in the United States, 40% of food in the United States actually gets thrown away. And so there's a better way that we can handle our food waste. And I always like to include this little diagram. It says it's only one straw, said billions of people. Now, I don't want you to just think about this as a straw. Think about it. It's a straw. It's a plastic bag. It's a clamshell container, right? And this statistic is really harrowing. 71% of seabirds and 30% of sea turtles have been found with plastic in their stomachs. And by 2050, it's anticipated that there may be more plastic in the ocean than fish. And so it's really important to reduce plastic use when you can. If you need a straw, of course, have a straw. If you are able to use a reusable straw, that could be a really good option. And it's important to remember that you don't have to eliminate plastic all of the time when you're eating out. It's just good to try to reduce it as much as possible. Because if you think I'm going to eliminate it and then you can't, for whatever reason, it's going to demoralize you. We don't need perfection. We just need a lot of people doing a lot of newer things imperfectly. It's also important to appreciate the outdoors. Here's a photo of some of our students who went on the Cahaba River and went kayaking. When you go out and enjoy the beauty that Alabama has to offer, it gives you an appreciation, but it also reminds you of what we're trying to conserve and protect. It's also a great way. A great way to be sustainable is through gardening. So gardening can allow you to source really local tomatoes. There's no such more of a local produce than something that you got out of your backyard. So growing things like garlic or tomatoes or basil, produce that you eat regularly is a great way to live sustainably, but it's also great for mindfulness. It's a great way to relax. And if you say, well, I don't really have space for a garden, that's okay too. The UAB Sustainability Program offers a garden program for UAB faculty, staff, and students where we'll provide you with a garden plot. That's actually where these photos were taken. You get a garden plot if you're faculty or staff for $25, and for students, it's $15. So this is just a really great way to try to be as sustainable as possible. And then zero waste culture. Again, this is something that you would want to do imperfectly, right? We're not asking you to generate zero waste because that would be impossible. It really is impossible to live a zero waste lifestyle. Even some people who live a zero waste lifestyle, they'll carry around a jar of all the trash they've ever generated. Well, that's still trash they've generated, right? And so there's not a way for us to live perfectly zero waste. But what we can do is live imperfectly zero waste. So using things like beeswax wrap to wrap produce instead of cellophane wrap, or using a reusable, refillable bottle instead of a water bottle, for example. Using silicone bags instead of plastic sandwich bags is a great way too. And there's also plastic-free cosmetics that individuals can use as well. And these are all just great ways to try to reduce the amount of plastic waste that's being generated. And so while we're talking about refillable water bottles, it's important to remember that you don't have to use a sink to refill your water bottle. There's a lot of refillable water bottle filling stations at UAB. and also in gyms and banks and a lot of other places. And this is one of the most effective ways to reduce plastic pollution while staying hydrated and saving money, right? If you have a refillable water bottle, you're not paying to refill it, but I guarantee you that if you have a plastic bottle, once you're finished with that, if you toss it and you want another one, you'll be paying for it at the vending machine, right? Many individuals do choose to drink bottled water as opposed to drinking tap water because they believe that it's cleaner. But in fact, 25% of bottled water is just tap water. And Birmingham is known to have consistently be a city with high quality of water. So you can be comfortable and happy knowing that you're drinking clean water when you refill your water bottle. And you can also conserve energy and clean it up. So how can we conserve energy? You can turn lighting and electrical appliances off when not in use. And if you really want to take it a step further, you can even unplug electrical equipment that's not in use. Things like gaming systems or toasters or toaster ovens, things like that. In fact, that is called phantom load or vampire energy, the electricity that's used when things are plugged in but off. And that can account as much as 30% of a household's electricity. So there's really a great way to save electricity and money by implementing some of these practices. You can also set your thermostat to 78 in the summer and 68 in the winter. So 78 degrees can be pretty warm on certain days, and same with 68. It might not be warm enough during the winter. So it's really important to make sure that you're safe and comfortable. So these could be temperature settings that you do when you're no longer home. Perhaps you're at work, you can set your thermostat to these settings. And it is important, if you can't remember particularly that 78 degrees in the summer, to follow the 20-degree rule, meaning that you don't set your air conditioner colder than 20 degrees outside. That's going to be challenging when it's 110 degrees outside, of course. We don't want you to set your thermostat to 90 degrees. So this is not a definitive rule, but it is a helpful rule if it's, say, 101 degrees outside. You can set your thermostat to 81, especially when you're not home. The reason why we recommend this is not only to help save energy, but to also make sure that your air conditioner can work as effectively as possible. Air conditioners aren't built to try to cool air off by more than 20 degrees. And so it really strains it when you have it set colder than 20 degrees. And then you can advocate for clean electricity where you live. So talk with your local leaders wherever you may be, whether that's in Alabama or maybe you live in a different state or a different country now. Talk with your local leaders about how you can source electricity in a clean way, and talk with your utility too. And then commute consciously. Try reviewing how you commute to work and how you can make it more sustainable, whether you're living in Birmingham and working at UAB or not. We did a transportation survey and found that 90% of UAB faculty and staff drive alone to work. That's compared to 80.5% of Alabamians who drove alone to work in 2021. So there's a lot of opportunity for reducing emissions here and being a little more sustainable. You can try carpooling. So try to find a colleague that maybe has a similar work schedule as you do and lives close to where you are. Commute Smart will pay for you to carpool again, and UAB Parking and Transportation, if you're a UAB faculty, staff, or student, will give you a carpooling permit, and it'll give you priority parking. I know it can be really difficult to find parking, so that's a really big incentive that UAB offers. And then try out the Birmingham Jefferson County Transit Authority buses. Perhaps you don't live somewhere that's close enough to allow you to ride on the bus for work, but maybe if you're planning on going downtown for lunch and you work at UAB, maybe you can map out to see if you can take the bus. Try it on a day when you're not particularly busy, so you're not too anxious since you're trying something new. And that way you can get an idea of what it's like to take public transit in Birmingham, and maybe it's something that you'd be willing to try more often. Just remember, fare costs $2.50, so it's important to make sure that you have that on hand. And it's really important to remember that we can do this. A lot of people think that when it comes to sustainable practices that an individual does, that individual decisions don't matter, or that living sustainably just isn't possible, or we're not going to solve all of the sustainable problems that we face as a society. But I want to give you all an environmental history lesson for those of you that don't remember. So at one point in time, there was something called a hole in the ozone layer, and that was considered a global crisis. Fear of sun exposure, melanoma cases, and extinction of some species motivated the world to rally together and address this problem. And within a few years, ozone-depleted chemicals were outlawed globally and were replaced with alternatives that didn't harm the ozone layer as much. And after a few years, the hole in the ozone layer began to heal. And you can see this image on the left from NASA showing exactly that. You can see just how much red there is in 1979 and how little red there is in 2011. And it's actually expected that the ozone layer will be fully repaired by 2040. And so it's really important to remember that although sometimes challenges can seem overwhelming, we can do this. And regarding your individual actions, I want to leave you with a famous quote from a famous philosopher who once said, "Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not." Thank you.
Fantastic information, Nick. And if anybody has questions for Nick, drop them in the chat. We have time for Q&A. He purposely left time to address any questions that you might have. So Nick, and this may be just an opinion or you may have insight. When it comes to the buildings that are popping up on campuses, we have a lot of them. UAB is definitely putting a focus on that. Is there a very strategic approach with the architecture process, the pre-planning process that has a big eye on sustainability?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And so whenever UAB is planning to build a new building, and whenever we're going out to bid for building a new building, we actually put it in the bid specifications that the building is going to be LEED certified, and architects and construction contractors know exactly what that means. And so oftentimes we'll say, this is going to be a LEED certified building. These are the things that we want to accomplish in this building. Whoever wins this bid is going to have to hit these benchmarks.
Is there a way to retrofit the current buildings that we have that may not be LEED certified? And is that in part of the plan as well?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So there are certain buildings that can be retrofitted. UAB does have some smaller buildings on campus that it does make just more sense to demo that building and either turn it into green space or make it a much larger building, so a retrofit wouldn't be appropriate. But for example, the McCollum Basic Science building on University, that building wasn't torn down, right? That building was retrofitted and renovated and was awarded LEED certification for its retrofit. So it's definitely possible to do, and it's something we've done before and will continue to do where it's appropriate.
What are just simple things? And I know we talked a little bit about it, but simple things that our audience can do so they can become more sustainable. We obviously talked about commuting and different things, but are there other tips, suggestions you might have?
Yeah, I think a really good way to be more sustainable is to just take a step back and take a bird's eye view on everything that you're doing. Sometimes like a waste audit, right? Sometimes that could be just looking in your trash can and seeing what you're throwing away and saying, oh, could I recycle this? Or better yet, could I try to prevent this from going to landfill in its entirety? So a good example could be, say you've got some plastic water bottles, right? You could ask yourself, oh, I could recycle this. Or you could say, oh, maybe I could, drink from a glass and get a water purification system for my home instead. I really encourage people to just take a step back and look at how they can be more sustainable. You'd be surprised at what you can find.
I do want to mention, I can't remember if it was a podcast or if it was the webinar that we had with Dr. Jim McClintock, but he talked about the ozone and how it is being repaired. So very interesting. If you want to check that out, check our website, either /Green and Told for the podcast or /videos for a replay of the event. Nick, it's been a fantastic 45 minutes just hearing what UAB is doing, what we can do to better ourselves. So thank you so much again for taking your time to be with us.
Yeah, of course. And if at any point in time anyone has any questions, I can try to drop my email in the chat, and feel free to reach out. And thank you all again for attending the webinar and learning about sustainability.
Thank you so much. And there it is in the chat. So if somebody wants to reach out to Nick, feel free. A quick reminder, a replay of today's webinar will be uploaded on our website by tomorrow. As an attendee, you'll get an email once that link is ready. Before we go, we have a few webinars to pass along to you. Next Tuesday, September 23rd, join Dr. Stephen Ostad for Can We Starve Ourselves to Better Health and Longer Life, as we take a look at what data says about the impact of food restriction and our health. On Tuesday, October 10th, we'll be exploring alumni travel with Jack Brinson of Colette, discovering more about trips to Ireland, England and France, the Canadian Rockies, and Switzerland, Austria, and Bavaria. And I'm going to tell you, the Ireland trip is already sold out. So we'll be focusing on some of the others, including a special D-Day 70th anniversary to England and France. On Tuesday, October 17th, we'll welcome Dr. Megan Hayes for Head Over Meals, Weight Management Strategies from Behavioral Health. Learn what factors influence weight gain. And on Thursday, October 26th, join us for Hansen History, the reality of urban legends. Popular content creator and alumnus Joshua Darren will explore the rich history of folklore and urban legends in Alabama and in the South. You can register for these and more at alumni.uab.edu/events. Finally, we'd love to get your feedback on what you thought about today's webinar. The QR code on your screen takes you to a very short survey. Share your thoughts so we know what you'd like to see and how we can continually provide good content. Once again, thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar. And as always, go Blazers.